I'm a 36-year-old guy, been working in software development for the past decade at a decent company in the Pacific Northwest. My ex-wife, Natasha, she's 34. We'd been together for 7 years total, married for 5 of those. Met her at a tech conference where she was presenting on organizational behavior. She worked in corporate training and development, pulling in solid money. We seemed like a good match, both career-focused, both practical about life. We bought this nice townhouse about 3 years back in one of those neighborhoods where everyone's got their life together on paper. 2 cars, good jobs, annual trips to Europe or Asia, the whole package. We talked about kids eventually, but kept pushing it back because we were both climbing our respective ladders. Looking back, maybe that should have been a sign, but hindsight's always crystal clear, right? Anyway, everything seemed normal until it wasn't. I remember coming home after this brutal 12-hour shift dealing with a system migration that went sideways. All I wanted was to decompress, maybe order Thai food, watch something mindless on Netflix. The second I walked through the door, I could feel this weird energy. Natasha was sitting on the couch with her laptop, but she had this intensity about her, like she was preparing for battle or something. We went through the motions of dinner, talking about surface-level garbage. Her boss being incompetent, my project deadlines, the neighbor's loud dog. Then we settled in the living room and she just kept scrolling through her laptop, barely acknowledging I existed. I tried to initiate some physical contact, nothing crazy, just leaned in to kiss her shoulder. She jerked away like I'd burned her. "Don't," she said flatly, eyes still on the screen. "I'm not interested." I tried to keep my voice level. "You haven't been interested in weeks. What's going on?" That's when she closed the laptop and looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before. Cold, clinical. "I'm not interested tonight, tomorrow, or any other night. I've decided I'm done with that aspect of our marriage." I literally couldn't process what she was saying. My brain just stopped working for a second. "What do you mean, done?" She launched into this whole speech about how she'd been educating herself on women's autonomy and bodily consent, how she'd realized she'd been conditioned by society to provide physical affection to men, and how she was reclaiming her agency by refusing to participate in those patriarchal structures anymore. She said I could either accept it or not, but the decision was final and non-negotiable. I sat there like an idiot, trying to understand how my wife had just unilaterally ended physical closeness in our marriage without any prior discussion. "So you're just deciding this for both of us, without even talking about it first?" "I don't need your permission to control my own body," she shot back. "The fact that you think this requires negotiation just proves how entitled men are." I tried explaining that this wasn't about entitlement. It was about partnership and connection between 2 people who supposedly loved each other. She countered that love doesn't obligate anyone to perform acts they don't want to perform. When I asked when this changed, when she stopped wanting to be with me, she just shrugged and said it had been building for a while, but she'd finally found the courage to vocalize it. That night I crashed on the couch, not because she asked me to, but because I couldn't lie next to someone who'd just blown up my entire understanding of our relationship. The next few days were surreal. We kept living together, eating together, and existing in the same space, but there was this massive invisible barrier between us. She acted like her announcement was completely normal, like she just told me she wanted to switch to a different brand of coffee. I suggested couples therapy. She rolled her eyes and said there was nothing wrong with her, and she wasn't going to be pressured into closeness just because society expected it. She suggested I get therapy for my dependency on female validation. Every conversation became this minefield, where anything I said got twisted into evidence of male oppression. I spent nights staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out where I'd missed the signs. Our intimate life had slowed down over the past year, sure, but that seemed normal for a couple who'd been together as long as we had. Both working demanding jobs. We still went on date nights, still held hands, still said we loved each other, or we had until recently. The reality hit me hard. I was in a marriage where I wasn't wanted or needed in any meaningful way. I was just convenient. A bill payer, a social accessory for couple events, a housemate who helped maintain the appearance of a successful marriage. I tried one more time to understand. Caught her on a weekend morning when we were both home. "Natasha, I'm trying to respect your feelings, but I need to understand what's happening. Did I do something wrong? Is there something I can change?" She sighed like I'd asked the most exhausting question in the world. This is exactly the problem with men. You think everything revolves around you. This is about my journey and my autonomy. The fact that you're making it about what you did wrong just proves my point. But we're married, I said, frustration building. Your decisions affect me, too. So what? You think your entitlement to my body outweighs my right to control it. This is why patriarchy persists, because men like you can't handle women making their own choices. I walked away from that conversation feeling completely hopeless. There was no reasoning with her, no finding middle ground. She'd constructed this narrative where any disagreement with her position just confirmed her worldview about oppressive men. About 2 weeks after her declaration, I found myself sitting in my car outside our townhouse, unable to summon the energy to go inside. Another evening of polite coexistence with someone who'd unilaterally changed our entire relationship. Another lecture about how I was part of the problem for expecting basic human connection in a marriage. That's when something shifted in my head. I had a choice. I could keep living in this emotional wasteland, hoping for change that would never come. Or I could redirect my time, attention, and resources towards something that actually offered the possibility of growth. I started small. Set my alarm for 5 in the morning, a full hour before Natasha woke up. Those quiet morning hours became sacred. I started with meditation, something I'd always dismissed as impractical. 20 minutes of stillness helped clear my head of the constant thoughts about my failing marriage. Then I added exercise. Nothing dramatic at first, just basic bodyweight stuff and short runs around the neighborhood. By the time she emerged from the bedroom, I'd already showered, dressed, and started my day with purpose. "You're up early," she commented on the third day, finding me reading at the kitchen table. There was this slight annoyance in her voice. She was used to me being half asleep while she dominated the morning routine. "Just making some changes," I replied casually, not offering any explanation. She didn't ask for one, just muttered something under her breath about toxic masculinity and gym culture that I pretended not to hear. Second week, I joined a gym near my office. Instead of rushing home after work to an increasingly uncomfortable environment, I spent an hour working out. The physical exertion became therapeutic. Each rep pushed out another fragment of resentment and self-pity. I also reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during my marriage, guys Natasha had always criticized for being too immature or problematic. Nothing dramatic, just casual lunches and after-work coffee. I didn't mention my marital situation. These meetings weren't about seeking sympathy or trash-talking my wife. They were about rebuilding connections that had nothing to do with my identity as Natasha's husband. What really struck me was realizing how many other guys were dealing with similar situations. Not identical, but the same pattern. Partners who'd gradually transformed into critical strangers, constantly finding fault with normal behavior while expecting the financial benefits and emotional support to continue unchanged. My buddy Trevor, 38, was dealing with a wife who'd suddenly decided his weekend mountain biking was problematic despite having married him, knowing it was his main stress relief. My college friend Damon couldn't post anything online without his girlfriend publicly commenting to correct his thinking on various social issues. "It's like they want us to be both mind readers and punching bag," Trevor said during one of our lunch meetups. "You can't win." That phrase stuck with me. You can't win. Not if you keep playing by constantly changing rules you had no say in creating. So maybe the answer was to stop playing altogether and create my own game. I started setting aside money in a separate account Natasha couldn't access. Nothing dramatic that would affect our household contributions, just redirecting my discretionary spending and slowly building a safety net. If nothing else, it gave me a sense of control in a situation where I felt increasingly powerless. 1 month into my transformation, I caught my reflection and barely recognized myself. The daily workouts had started reshaping my body. Shoulders broader, stomach flatter, posture improved. The constant tension that had knotted my shoulders for months had eased. But the biggest change was in my eyes. They looked focused, alive in a way they hadn't been since her declaration. I updated my wardrobe next. Nothing flashy, just well-fitted clothes that suited my improving physique and projected confidence. When I wore a new jacket to dinner with friends, several people commented on how good I looked. "You've been hitting the gym, haven't you?" our friend Bethany asked during a dinner party. "Just taking better care of myself," I replied with a smile. Natasha noticed too, though she tried to disguise her interest with criticism. "Isn't that shirt a little tight? Seems like you're trying way too hard." Very midlife crisis energy. I just smiled and left without responding, which seemed to annoy her even more. The transformation extended to my finances as well. We'd always maintained separate accounts alongside our joint one for household expenses. I continued contributing my share to our joint obligations, but redirected my discretionary spending. The expensive wellness retreat in Bali that Natasha had been hinting about for our anniversary, that money went instead into a high-yield investment account under only my name. I also invested in a woodworking class, a passion I'd abandoned years ago after Natasha complained about the time it took away from us. Ironic now, considering her stance. Woodworking got me into the garage on weekends, creating furniture and small art pieces. These solo sessions became another form of meditation. Working with my hands, shaping each piece, I found a state of flow that allowed me to forget everything else. I invested in decent equipment, nothing outrageous, but a good table saw and quality hand tools. My first few attempts were pretty amateur, but I watched tutorials online and practiced constantly. Soon I was creating pieces I was genuinely proud of. Custom cutting boards, small tables, decorative boxes with intricate joinery. I started selling my work online, connecting with other woodworkers and building a small following that appreciated my craftsmanship. Some of my pieces even started selling for decent money through an online marketplace, creating a small but growing side income that went straight into my separate account. "Where have you been spending all your time on Saturdays?" she asked, after several weeks of my new routine, the entitlement in her voice crystal clear. She was used to me being available whenever she wanted. "In the garage, working on projects," I answered simply. "Since when are you into woodworking?" The accusatory tone, like I needed her permission to have hobbies. "I've always been into it. I just haven't had the time to pursue it until now." Her expression suggested she wanted to ask more, but couldn't quite figure out how. Or perhaps didn't want to show too much interest in my life after having so deliberately stepped back from it. "Well, I needed help with some things around the house last weekend, but you were nowhere to be found," she complained. Typical. No interest in my activities, just how they inconvenienced her. "You could have texted," I replied calmly. "Phone works even in the garage. I shouldn't have to text my own husband to get basic help," she snapped. I just shrugged. Things change. Those two words hung in the air between us, and I saw something flicker across her face. The first hint that she was beginning to realize her declaration might have consequences she hadn't anticipated. At work, my renewed focus paid off significantly. I approached projects with clarity and confidence that hadn't been there during the months of marital distress. My manager, Patricia, 47, noticed the change. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up," she said after I successfully debugged a critical system issue that had been plaguing the team for weeks. "You're on fire lately." The compliment meant more than it should have. After months of feeling unwanted at home, professional recognition filled some of the void. Not completely, but enough to keep moving forward. I volunteered for projects that required travel, something I'd avoided in the past to spend more time with Natasha. A 4-day conference in Austin, a week-long training in Seattle, a client meeting in San Francisco. Each trip was a breath of fresh air. Hotel rooms where I could spread out without judgment. Meals where no one made snide comments about my choices. Conversations with people who didn't view every interaction through an ideological lens. During my Seattle trip, I met up with an old college friend, Kieran, who had moved there years ago. We explored the city and I bought some exotic wood from a specialty lumberyard for my projects. When I posted photos of my latest work online, my follower count jumped significantly and I sold 5 pieces within a week. "You know, you could actually turn this into a serious side business," Kieran said as we grabbed coffee at Pike Place Market. "Your craftsmanship is really impressive." His casual encouragement planted a seed in my mind. What if woodworking wasn't just an escape? What if it could be something more substantial? A potential path to a different future? 3 months into my transformation, I was sleeping better, looking better, and performing better in nearly every aspect of my life except my marriage, which remained this empty shell of formal interactions and parallel existences. The irony wasn't lost on me. In withdrawing her affection, Natasha had inadvertently pushed me toward becoming a stronger version of myself. It was like the universe's weird way of compensating. What Natasha didn't know was that I'd opened a separate checking account and started routing 60% of my paychecks there, including my performance bonuses. The other 40% was more than enough to cover my share of our joint expenses. I was building my escape fund dollar by dollar, Not that I was planning to leave yet. I wanted to see how this played out first. One evening, as I prepared to leave for a woodworking meetup, she asked an unexpected question. Are you seeing someone else? The entitlement in her voice was unbelievable. She could end our physical relationship unilaterally, but still expected exclusive access to my time and attention. I paused by the door, tool bag over my shoulder. No, I answered truthfully. Why would you ask that? You've changed, she said, her voice carrying a note I couldn't identify. You're hardly ever home anymore. The hypocrisy of her concern almost made me laugh. I'm just redirecting my time and energy into things that fulfill me, I replied, using her own clinical approach. Isn't that what you've been doing? That's different, she responded, clearly irritated that I'd used her own logic against her. I made a personal choice about my body and autonomy, and I'm making personal choices about my time and interests, I countered. Seems perfectly fair to me. So you're what, punishing me? She asked, her voice rising slightly. Not at all, I replied calmly. I'm adapting to our new reality. You set a boundary and I respect that. I'm simply setting boundaries of my own. She had no response to that, and I left without waiting for one. As I drove to meet my woodworking group, I realized something fundamental had shifted. For the first time since her declaration, I wasn't desperately hoping for her to change her mind. I was too busy creating a life that no longer centered around her approval or affection. I met my woodworking group at a community workshop space where we were learning advanced joinery techniques. Among them was a guy named Felix, who owned a boutique furniture store downtown. These are really impressive, he said, examining some photos of my recent work on my phone. We're always looking for local artisans for our showroom. Would you be interested in consigning some pieces? Just like that, another door opened. By the time I got home that night, Natasha was already in bed, probably annoyed that I hadn't been there to listen to her latest complaints about her colleagues or patriarchal oppression. I didn't care. I had bigger things on my mind. The pivotal moment came during a company offsite. 6 months into my transformation, my team had gathered at this mountain resort for a weekend of strategic planning and team building. After a productive day of meetings, we relaxed in the lodge, sharing drinks and stories around a massive stone fireplace. My colleague Zara, 31, who had joined the development team 4 months earlier, sat down beside me. Zara was pretty much Natasha's opposite, warm, supportive, and actually interested in other people's lives. You know, when I first started, everyone told me how lucky I was to be working with you, she said, her voice quiet enough that only I could hear. Really? Why is that? I asked, genuinely curious. They said you'd completely transformed the team's productivity, but they also mentioned that how much you've changed personally over the past few months. She hesitated, then added, They said you used to seem withdrawn, almost sad. That doesn't match the person I've known. I stared into the flames, considering how to respond. Let's just say I went through some personal challenges and decided to focus on what I could control rather than what I couldn't. She nodded thoughtfully. Well, whatever you did worked. You seem completely in your element now. As our conversation continued into the evening, I found myself relaxing in a way I hadn't with anyone in a long time. Zara was intelligent and insightful, with a sharp sense of humor that repeatedly caught me off guard. We discovered shared interests in craftsmanship and hiking, and she seemed genuinely impressed when I showed her some of my recent work on my phone. These are beautiful, she said, leaning closer to swipe through the gallery. You have a real gift. Have you considered selling these in galleries? Actually, I just started consigning with a boutique furniture store downtown, I replied, surprised at how good it felt to share this part of my life with someone who genuinely seemed to care. That's amazing. I'd love to see your workshop sometime, she said, smiling in a way that made me acutely aware of how long it had been since someone had looked at me with genuine admiration instead of criticism. The warmth of her shoulder against mine sent an unexpected jolt through my system, a stark reminder of how long it had been since I'd experienced even casual physical contact. I carefully shifted away, uncomfortable with my reaction. Despite the situation with Natasha, I wasn't going to be that guy who starts something new before ending the old. Later, as the group dispersed to their rooms, Zara walked alongside me down the hallway. Some of us are planning a sunrise hike tomorrow before the meetings start, she mentioned. You should join. The views from the ridge are supposed to be incredible. I agreed, and the next morning found myself standing atop a mountain ridge with Zara and 3 other colleagues as the sun painted the sky in brilliant purples and golds. I took dozens of photos on my phone, but found myself repeatedly drawn to Zara's profile against the dramatic backdrop. She represented everything I'd been missing: genuine interest, mutual respect, actual conversation rather than lectures. But I knew I needed to resolve my situation with Natasha before even considering anything else. When I returned home Sunday evening, Natasha was in the kitchen preparing dinner, something she hadn't done for us in months. The timing was suspicious as hell. "How was the offsite?" she asked, her tone unusually attentive. "Productive," I replied, setting down my bag. "We finalized the roadmap for the next quarter." She nodded, then asked, "I saw some of the photos you posted. Beautiful location." "It was," I agreed, wondering at her sudden interest. "That woman in some of the pictures, is she on your team?" The question caught me off guard. I hadn't realized Zara had featured prominently in my uploads. "That's Zara, our new senior developer," I answered neutrally. "She's very attractive," Natasha observed, her eyes studying my face. The territorial behavior was rich, coming from someone who had explicitly rejected me. "I hadn't really noticed," I lied, feeling oddly defensive. "Really? You've taken about a dozen photos with her in them. Seems like you noticed plenty." The accusatory tone was unmistakable. I chose my next words carefully. "She happened to be in the frame during our group activities." "Why are you asking about this? You made it very clear that certain aspects of our relationship are over. You don't get to dictate who I spend time with professionally." She turned back to the stove, clearly annoyed that I wasn't apologizing or explaining myself further. "Just curious about your colleagues, that's all. I have a right to know who my husband spends time with." That was the moment I decided to accelerate my exit plan. The one-sided nature of her expectations had become unbearable. The following week brought more surprises. Natasha started initiating conversations, asking about my day, even suggesting we watch shows together. She made dinner several times and didn't pepper the conversation with her usual ideological commentary. It was like living with a completely different person. Or rather, with the person I'd married years ago before she'd transformed into a stranger. I knew exactly what was happening. She was trying to reestablish control, to pull me back into orbit. Now that she sensed I was drifting away, she wanted to reel me back in. The realization strengthened my resolve. This wasn't about revenge. It was about self-preservation. 2 key events aligned to create the perfect opportunity for my freedom. First, I received a significant promotion at work with a substantial raise and expanded responsibilities. I kept this information to myself, not sharing it with Natasha despite her increasingly desperate attempts to engage with me. Second, through my professional network, I learned that Natasha's company was planning major restructuring due to budget cuts. Her department was likely to be hit hard. This wasn't insider trading or anything illegal, just the kind of information that flows through business connections in our mid-sized city. The timing couldn't have been better. Over the past months, through my networking and new social connections, I'd learned about these impending layoffs. In fact, I'd helped a colleague's partner get hired at a competing firm 5 weeks earlier, knowing they'd need someone with Natasha's exact qualifications. I could have easily done the same for Natasha. A single phone call would have secured her an interview at minimum. But I chose not to. Instead, I accelerated my exit strategy. I consulted with a lawyer, discreetly paying in cash from my separate account. I learned exactly what I needed to do to protect myself financially in a divorce. I documented Natasha's declaration about ending physical closeness, her subsequent behavior, everything that might help my case. I also discovered through casual conversations that Natasha had been bad-mouthing me to her friends and family, painting herself as some kind of sufferer of patriarchy while conveniently omitting her unilateral decision to fundamentally change our marriage. This sealed the deal. My escape needed to be complete and decisive. 3 weeks later, Natasha's company announced the restructuring. She came home visibly shaken. "My department might be eliminated next month," she said, clearly expecting sympathy. "I'm really worried." "That's tough," I responded, offering basic courtesy but nothing more. "I'm sure you'll figure it out." The restructuring happened faster than expected. The following Thursday, Natasha came home in tears. "I lost my job," she sobbed. "They eliminated our entire department." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, maintaining a neutral expression. "What's your plan?" She looked shocked at my response. "My plan? I just lost my job. I need time to process this." "Of course," I replied. Take all the time you need, but our financial obligations don't stop, so just let me know how you plan to continue contributing to the household expenses. Her jaw literally dropped. Are you serious right now? I'm in crisis and you're asking about bills? I shrugged. Just being practical. We both contribute equally, right? That's always been your position. The next morning, I made my move while Natasha was in the shower. I transferred every penny from our joint account into my private account, leaving just enough to avoid overdraft fees. Then I packed a bag with essentials and my most important possessions. When she emerged from the bathroom, I was waiting in the living room with divorce papers. What's this? She asked, eyeing the documents. Divorce papers, I replied calmly. I've realized I deserve better than a one-sided marriage with someone who unilaterally changed the terms of our relationship without discussion or compromise. Her face went through a series of emotions: shock, anger, disbelief. You can't be serious? Because I wouldn't sleep with you? That's what this is about? No, it's about respect and reciprocity. You made a choice that affected us both, presented it as non-negotiable, and expected me to simply accept it. That's not a partnership. She scoffed. So you're running off with your little work girlfriend. How predictable. This has nothing to do with Zara or anyone else. This is about you and me and the broken agreement between us. By the way, I've moved our joint funds into a separate account that you won't have access to until we reach a settlement. Her face paled. You did what? You can't do that. I just lost my job. How am I supposed to pay for anything? Not my problem, I replied, echoing the same dismissive tone she'd used when ending our physical relationship. You should have considered the potential consequences before making unilateral decisions about our marriage. This is financial misuse, she shouted, tears forming in her eyes. I need that money for basic necessities. No, this is consequences. And speaking of necessities, the mortgage is due next week. I've calculated your half. It's listed in the documents. I'll expect your payment on time. She started to panic visibly. Please, you can't do this. I have no income right now. I need time to find a new job. You should have thought about that before declaring not tonight or any night and treating me like an accessory to your life rather than a partner. You wanted independence from patriarchal expectations. Congratulations, you've got it. Complete financial independence, too. Over the next week, Natasha's behavior changed dramatically. The feminist rhetoric disappeared, replaced by desperate pleas and attempts to renegotiate. She suggested counseling, hinted at reconsidering her stance on closeness, even tried seduction one night, which I firmly rejected. My lawyer had advised me not to leave the house yet, so we continued living together in increasingly tense circumstances. Natasha's friends started calling me, telling me how cruel I was being, how I needed to support my wife in her time of need. I blocked their numbers one by one. Her parents reached out next, suggesting we all meet to discuss the situation. I declined, politely but firmly. Your daughter made her choice months ago, I told her father over the phone. I'm simply making mine now. 2 weeks into the standoff, Natasha's desperation peaked. She had no job prospects, no access to our joint savings, and bills piling up. She approached me one evening, completely defeated. Please, she begged, tears streaming down her face. I need help. I can't do this alone. That's an interesting perspective, I replied coolly. Wasn't it you who told me that women don't need men? That marriage is just a patriarchal construct? That physical closeness with me was something you could unilaterally end without discussion? I was wrong, she whispered. I got caught up in all these ideas without thinking about what they really meant. Please, I'll do anything. We can go to counseling, rebuild our relationship, whatever you want. The problem is, Natasha, I don't want that anymore. You showed me who you really are. Someone who views relationships as transactional, who takes what she wants and discards the rest. Now that you need something from me, suddenly you're willing to reconsider everything? That's not love or partnership. That's opportunism. I stood up, gathering my keys. I'm moving out tomorrow. The divorce papers are ready for your signature. If you contest them, I'm prepared for a legal battle that will drain what little resources you have left. If you sign them as is, I'll provide a one-time payment to help you transition to your new independent life. You planned this all along, she realized, her voice hollow. From the moment I said those words, you were planning your exit. No, I corrected her. I planned this from the moment I realized you saw me as disposable. You taught me an important lesson about self-worth, Natasha, and for that I suppose I should thank you. I moved out the next day into a new apartment I'd secretly secured weeks earlier. Natasha signed the divorce papers without contest, receiving her settlement payment as promised. I heard through mutual friends that she moved back in with her parents in a different state, her feminist ideals apparently set aside in favor of practical needs. As for me, I continued building my new life, advancing in my career, developing my woodworking business on the side, maintaining my physical fitness, and yes, eventually starting a genuine relationship with Zara, who showed me what real partnership looks like. 6 months after my divorce was finalized, my first solo exhibition opened at a local artisan gallery. Among the pieces on display was a striking walnut coffee table with intricate inlay work that I'd created during those early morning sessions in my garage, the period when I realized I deserved better. The greatest victory wasn't taking Natasha's financial security or even her dignity. It was becoming the man I should have been all along, confident, self-sufficient, and unwilling to accept anything less than a genuine reciprocal relationship. In trying to diminish me, she inadvertently set me free. Sometimes Natasha still tries to contact me, especially when she's struggling financially. I maintain minimal business-like communication as needed to finalize any remaining legal matters, but otherwise I've moved on completely. Our mutual friends eventually learned the full story and most understood my position, even if they felt I was harsh in my execution. But here's the thing about consequences. They're not harsh or kind, they're just inevitable. Natasha chose to destroy the foundation of our marriage while expecting the structure to remain standing. When it collapsed, she was simply experiencing the natural outcome of her own actions. This experience taught me that self-respect isn't selfish, it's essential, and that sometimes the most powerful response to someone who treats you as disposable is to simply agree with them and walk away. Not in anger or bitterness, but with the calm certainty that you deserve more than they're willing to give. So if you're reading this and recognizing your own relationship in my story, know that you have choices. You don't have to accept unilateral changes to your marriage. You don't have to diminish yourself to accommodate someone else's ideology. And most importantly, you don't have to wait for permission to start building a life that fulfills you. The person who tries to change the rules without your input is telling you exactly how much they value your voice in the relationship. Listen to what they're really saying, not just with their words, but with their actions, and then decide if that's enough for you.